right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Irrational Confidence Podcast. We're talking college football, and it's week 2. The first week is over. The games were great, but now the matchups continue. The rivalries go deeper, and the new rivalries coming out, they're happening this week. I'm joined by my co-host, the man who placed 5th in a pirate costume contest at the Vero Beach Pirate Days. Fresh, how you doing?
Well, I still don't have a patch on, so it's a good thing. Doing great though. Week 1 was nuts. Obviously LSU still trying to figure out how to block the field goal, protection, and Florida State as a huge win. Major props to the Noles for getting that done. Definitely a lot of issues though in Baton Rouge. Georgia Tech and Clemson, that Monday night game wrapped off the whole weekend. That was another fantastic one. Fantastic one for your Clemson fan. If Georgia Tech, you've scored 10 points in the past 3 games, so you definitely have some work to do. But hey, week 2, push all that side, move forward, improve, and ready to get it going.
Fresh, before we get started, which is better, the Vero Beach Pirate Festival or the Festival of the Trees?
I have honestly never heard of the Festival of Trees, so I'm just going to go ahead and say the Pirate Festival. I've never heard of that either. So I don't know what you're reading or what you're finding, but Pirate Days are good days.
All right. Fresh, where are you going first for this weekend?
We're going to take this one to Iowa City. The Cy-Hawk Trophy is on the line. Iowa State, Iowa. This is obviously a rivalry that's been owned by Iowa for a long, long time. They've been dominant. They've won 6 straight. And it just kind of feels what we've seen in the past few games from Iowa. This has to be Iowa State's time to break through. Matt Campbell's 0-5 in his time in this rivalry. Average score 26-16. It doesn't feel like, he always sometimes has the better team offensively, and they never show up. And that Iowa defense just gets it done. Iowa State's only surpassed 20 points 4 times in these last 10 matchups. They basically, their offense, what they're really known for, just gets absolutely shut down. Most recently, though, they finally did pass that 20-point in a 44-41 overtime loss. So they kind of got close. They just couldn't break through. Last year, game day was on site, couldn't break through. It's really, I think this time for the Cyclones, bringing this offense together and finding ways to punch through, but then defensively also taking advantage of a very mediocre at best Iowa offense. You're looking at the Hawkeyes have only scored 30 or more points 4 times in the past 15 games. And the last time was 33 points versus Illinois back in November. Their last 3 games, they have scored 7, 17, and 3 on offense versus Michigan, Kentucky, and South Dakota State. As we mentioned last time, they scored 7 total points, 3 on offense, and then 2 via safety to find a way to beat South Dakota State. You've got to be better. Spencer Petras in those last 3 games, 109 yards, 1 pick, 211 yards, 1 touchdown, 3 picks, and he threw 137 versus Michigan with no touchdowns and no interceptions. Your quarterback has got to be better. Sam Laporta, your tight end, versus South Dakota State, 2 catches for 9 yards. He's supposed to be the big stud tight end, get the ball to. He was a big playmaker, the only guy on the offense last year that really did anything. You've got to funnel him to football. And they did, obviously, maybe they were holding him out, first game jitters, whatever. They've got to find a way to make him a priority on offense. And looking at LaShawn Williams, he's got to do much better from the running back position, get more of those, generate more of those yards. It blows my mind, though. Iowa, they have an offensive lineman factory somewhere on campus. They just build linemen. They create 6'7" behemoths and put them out there. How they cannot open up holes for running backs versus anybody and be able to move the football down the field, or even like last week, how that offensive line cannot take over a football game and let guys just get 4 and 5 yards a clip is beyond me. They've got to be better. Kirk Ferentz has got to figure out an offensive flow, whether it's getting even more simple and running the football, but you've got to generate yards, maintain possession, because that defense is too fantastic to be exploited and wasted by a lack of offense. They've got to find ways, and hopefully this football game is where that Hawkeye offense figures it out and sort of generates it and moves it forward. Looking at the other side of the ball, really we're going to try to find out more about Iowa State in their new quarterback spot and their new running back spot. They lost Breece Hall. They lost Brock Purdy. Hunter Dekers was the backup for the past couple of years. Threw for 293 and 4 touchdowns in the opener. Jareer Brock ran for 104 to touchdown. You kind of start seeing that. Obviously, they played Southeast Missouri State. Nothing really great there. What can they take advantage of and move forward in this week and get going? They are led, though, offensively by Jacksonville product wide receiver Xavier Hutchinson, who had 3 touchdowns last week, 128 yards. He's the focal point of that Cyclone offense. They're going to have to find a way to keep diverting him the football and being very creative offensively, because that defense from Iowa, especially in that secondary, is so fantastic. And Jack Campbell, linebacker, and some really great defensive linemen. You got playmakers all the field. You've got to be able to move Hutchinson around, not get in that one-on-one coverage, put him in the slot, put the ball in his hands, but be creative to get him the football if he is your only true option. But obviously, it's got to figure it out. They have probably a decent enough defense to lock in with that Iowa offense. It's now the real challenge is that Cyclone offense putting up points for once against the Iowa defense, which is very tough to do. Granted, most people can't, but finding ways to get this thing done. This is a big standard. They haven't won it in a long time. They've got to find a way to take advantage of it. Iowa wins. People are going to look at, hey, Iowa's 2-0. They find ways to get through it and they keep moving forward. Maybe action really starts taking if Iowa State finally breaks through and gets that W. I don't know if Kinnick has enough magic to generate enough offense for the Hawkeyes. I think this is the year. I'm going to say it. The Cyclones find a way to go in to Iowa City, generate just enough offense, and maintain control. Use some turnovers from Iowa to help spur a short field, and get a win 17-3. Iowa State beats Iowa 17-3, and finally gets the Cy-Hawk Trophy back in their hands.
I don't know you're fresh. I like this game a lot. I think that this is one of the most underrated rivalry games there is in college football. I think that because it's stuck in the middle of the Midwest, and it's in the state of Iowa where there's cornfields and not a whole lot else, I like this rivalry. I always have. I think it's a very competitive game year in and year out. It reminds me a lot of the West Virginia Pitt rivalry. And I think the guy that I'm most interested to see is Xavier Hutchins again. I'm interested to see how Xavier Hutchinson really produces. He had the 3 touchdowns in the first week. I think that you're right. He's going to be a problem for the Hawkeyes. I don't know if I would say 17-3. I think that you're right. I think the Cyclones go into Iowa, get the job done. I'm going to say that this is a 17-14 game. I think it's a late field goal, end of the game. Iowa State winds up pulling the upset. Matt Campbell gets his first win against Iowa.
I'm kind of worried, though, just to real wrap it up, is if Matt Campbell doesn't win this one, you're 0-6 versus your in-state rival. You haven't won a conference title. The last time Iowa State's won a conference championship was 1912. There's a lot of things that have happened in the world since 1912. At what point does he just become a coach and not the real guy who's changing that program?
Absolutely. What's the spread in that game?
I have not looked, but it's probably not very much.
Yeah, I'd probably take. I'd be interested to see what the spread is, but I'd definitely be taking the under in that game.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Fresh. The game I'm going to, my first game of the week, is the Baylor Bears traveling to Provo, Utah to face the BYU Cougars. BYU moving up in the top 25, moving it up to 21. Soak it in, BYU. Soak it in because you're moving up that ladder and you have a chance to really, really move up this week with a win here. My question is, which defense is going to show up? Which team's defense is going to show up where they're going to prevent the other team's offense from going high power in a high power attack? Baylor last week really put the boots to their FCS opponent that they played, wound up going just absolutely insane. BYU going to Tampa on the road in a delay and wind up putting the boots to USF. Which high-powered attack is going to get slowed down? You take a look at BYU. BYU played a little bit better defense than Baylor. You take a look, they held South Florida to 279 yards and only 12 first downs there. I think that BYU, in order for them to win this game, they got to rely quite a bit on their running back, Christopher Brooks. The 6'1", 230-pound senior. Yeah, you heard that right. Kid is 6'1", 230. That's a big mamma jamma. 13 carries, 135 yards, a touchdown in that game. If you take a look also, BYU had 12 different players catch a pass from Jaron Hall. You're spreading the ball around quite a bit. You're going to need a couple of those receivers to become the primary target in that offensive attack. And then you take a look at BYU's defense. They left some gaps at times for USF to kind of move the ball around. But in the end, they played the contained level of defense. They bend, don't break defense. They gave up a few yards. They kept everything in front of them. And they really didn't give up those big plays to USF. On the reverse side, Baylor had 7 rushing touchdowns in their opening game by 6 different players. You look at this and we go to a guy by the name of Tay McWilliams here. He needs to be a little bit better. He's the starting running back. He only was averaging 3.8 yards a carry against an FCS opponent. That needs to be better. But Blake Shapen is exactly what we saw last year from him. Remember, Blake Shapen took over the starting job at the very, very end of the year for Baylor, came in, was extremely accurate. Nothing changed this year. Completed 85% of his passes in that opening weekend, 2 touchdowns there. He's got to find that tight end Ben Sims more. 6'5", he could be a really big matchup problem for BYU's linebackers. BYU's best part of their defense is their linebackers. Their linebackers are quick. They're going to come up and hit them. You're not going to go forward on the linebackers. They're going to stop you at the point of impact there. BYU has a nice set of experienced linebackers that are going to be able to control the defense. This is going to be a huge game, and it's going to come down to, is Jaron Hall or Blake Shapen going to be the first one to make a mistake? Which team can force the other team to make a mistake? If that happens, look for a guy by the name of Al Walcott, safety out of Baylor. He had a couple of times where he really flipped the field or had that big play out of the secondary last year. I really like him in this game to kind of step up and make some sort of play. In the end, BYU is a 3.5-point favorite at home versus the number 9 Baylor Bears. Vegas is putting some respect on BYU's name. 71% of the bets, I checked it this morning out of Vegas, 71% of the money right now is coming in on the Baylor Bears. They like Baylor as the underdog and getting those points. I don't know, you're fresh. I think this game is a toss-up. I think that 3.5 number is fantastic. I don't see this game going 4 points either way. So I don't see BYU winning by more than 4. I don't see Baylor winning more than 4. In the end, I told you at the start of the season, Fresh, I was real high on BYU. I'm going to stick with the Cougars. I'm going to let BYU pull off the upset, even though Vegas doesn't think it's an upset. And BYU, your fan base, soak it in, everyone, because you are 2-0 and you have a nice, nice win under your belt.
I mean, Lavelle Edwards is a very hostile environment. Great crowd there. They pack the thing in. It gets loud. Elevation comes into a factor. This is going to be a real big test, though, for that BYU offense versus a very, very stingy, legitimate defense. They don't get much of these opportunities. So this is a real chance to see from that offensive perspective where they're at. You saw in the opener, if you're watching that USF, BYU matchup, they even took some of their stud receivers and put them in the slot. A lot of motion, a lot of direct sweeps. A lot of ways to get playmakers of football untraditionally just from a running back behind center or offside, off to the right of the quarterback. Shootout. This is going to test the offensive playmakers that they lost last year. You lose Thornton, who got drafted by the Patriots. You lose Abram Smith, got running back, and now with the Saints. Those 2 big playmakers really push that offense. You're going to need them. You're going to need those other guys to really step up their game if they do get in a shootout on the road. Baylor, if they have any hope at a BCS, BCS, a college football playoff, this is the opportunity where you can score a big road win and then make a run through conference. Big challenge. Dave Aranda should have that defense ready to go. But I think with you, BYU will find a way. They're a little more battle tested over the past few years, and they have a little more experience coming back. They find a way to get this one done. I'm saying 27-20.
Awesome there, Fresh. All right, Fresh, let's go to our fan game of the week. Fans voted on this. It is Florida versus Kentucky. Both teams coming off of big wins last week. Fresh, give me a little bit on Florida versus Kentucky.
Both teams are ranked now. Florida went from unranked to number 12 in the country after a huge win versus Utah. Kentucky had their game. They beat Miami by half, but it really wasn't spectacular. So you're sort of trying to gauge off both those, making that week 2. These 2 programs have split the last 4 matchups. So it's definitely not, it's been going back and forth. A little pendulum has been swung in different directions lately. I first want to look at Kentucky. Will Levis is the quarterback. There's a lot of players who even before week 1, Coach Stoops said that they were suspended. He didn't name names outside of Chris Rodriguez, the running back, and he didn't actually give extensive information behind how many games each player was suspended. He said multiple games for some guys, but he really wouldn't say who was returning this week. So we really don't know. Based off of the off-field stuff, Rodriguez most likely will not play in this football game. So that kind of also takes away from your stud veteran running back going into the swamp that you usually are relying on the past few years. And really going to have to look at using more of a group effort to generate offense. They don't have Wendell Robinson at wide receiver either. And another thing that was really alarming in that game versus Miami of Ohio during week 1 is that Will Levis got hit a lot, much more than he probably should have been. And you think, hey, it's Kentucky. Everyone's talked about their offensive line. They're great. Well, 2 of their stud offensive linemen last year that made them so, stalwarts and made them so powerful were drafted in Fortner and Kennard. Those 2 guys, they haven't really replaced them yet. And those 2 guys were drafted in the first 3 to 4 rounds. So you lose some studs there. They're trying to find those guys to replace them and get that running game, get that protection. And the way that Florida defense played last week, they gave up a lot of yards, but they made plays when they had to down the stretch. So you might want to get that offensive line, really tell them to grow up quickly and work on your communication because the swamp got pretty loud last week, according to people who were there. And if you get yourself in a situation, that communication from the line could be a problem. So kind of Kentucky offensively has me kind of worried what they're bringing down to the swamp and if they can, compete, because that offensive line struggling is not going to be very conducive to Will Levis surviving that football game. On the other side, Richardson, he showed flashes. It was actually, I was listening to Chris Doering on SEC Morning, and it's funny. He's like, I watched, training camp. I watched, fall practice. You really didn't see the explosion plays, those kind of athletic plays from Richardson, because when you're running it, you don't want the quarterback getting hit, and usually the coaches are blowing the whistle at him. You're not seeing the spinning around. I think getting called a little earlier. Him there breaking out of contain, using the athletic ability, pumping the ball in the air, and guys jumping and him spinning off and running brought a whole new element that nobody had seen in Gator Nation or even in the swamp in a while. Now that that's out there, I think there's more awareness of what his athletic ability is bringing to the Gator offense. They will also be very focused on the ground like they were, whether it's Ian, Naquan, those 3 guys in that backfield are going to be the force until they can figure out a passing game that's actually consistent. The offense moved the football down the field. The Gator defense did get some stops, 2 inside the 5-yard line that prevented, 2 touchdowns. But they did give up a lot of yards. So it looks great on paper. The Gators won, but the yardage they gave up was very significant. And the 2 turnovers, the first one, Utah should have scored from the 1-yard line with the quarterback. They didn't. They got a little cocky, fumbled. That's the karma on them. And then the throw where they were setting for a field goal, they try to get aggressive, went for a touchdown, and Gators made a play. So if the Gators in situations riding a little high momentum right now, I honestly think that they find a way to put it together. I think Kentucky has too many questions in offense. The defense still looks a little unsettled. Florida somehow, I think that they have the playmaker. Richardson right now is the difference maker. Him and Ventrell Miller on the other side of the football for the Gators. The 2 of them lead them to a big win, push them to 2-0, setting up a really, really spicy matchup 2 weeks after that in Rocky Top versus Tennessee. So Gators get it done. I'm going to say 27-17 Florida over Kentucky.
So this concerns me a little bit fresh with Florida jumping from being unranked all the way up to number 12. I think that sometimes we get lost and be prisoners of the moment. Florida had all summer to prepare for Utah, and it was a great win by the Gators. No one's taking anything away from them. Anthony Richardson had a phenomenal game. But just like you said, that there were some moments of concern on that defense there. A quick turnaround time. I think Billy Napier is the right coach for Florida, but these are the moments where we're going to learn a lot of him as a coach early on in his career. Are you able to take that momentum, have a short week of practice, change your game planning to meet the Kentucky team? We know Mark Stoops up there in Kentucky can do that. We know he is a very good football coach. Look at what he's done to that Kentucky program. That Kentucky program was an afterthought. Like, it was basketball and then way far down the line Kentucky football. And now you're starting to see Kentucky be more interested in their football program. I'm nervous if I'm the Gators. I'm nervous about a letdown game. I'm nervous about not having that same amount of energy. The swamp is a dangerous place to go into. That student section is ruckus. They are loud, and they're going to make it very, very difficult for the Wildcats. That being said, I kind of want to go with Will Levis and Mark Stoops over Billy Napier and Anthony Richardson. I don't know, though, and I'm very, very torn on this pick right here. I guess I'm going to have to, I'll go with it. I'll say Kentucky by a point in the Swamp. Very, very close game. I'm going 28-27, game-winning touchdown by the Wildcats at the very, very end. Florida lets Kentucky stick around in that game and hold on to that victory, get that victory.
That's a prime game there at 7 o'clock Eastern, so that's going to get you that. That's going to bridge the gap to that Baylor BYU kick at 11 o'clock. So hopefully it's an exciting game that keeps you going all night.
All right, Fresh. Let's go up to Pittsburgh. Had one of the best games of the weekend last week, and 2 for 2 for them. The Tennessee Volunteers traveling up to Pitt. Tennessee is a 6.5-point favorite on the road. The media is going to say this game is going to be between Hendon Hooker and Slovis over there. Pitt, though, my biggest thing is Pitt giving up 400 yards of offense to that West Virginia team. I know that they had Daniels as the quarterback there in the Mountaineers. That Mountaineers team is really good. After watching them and I went back and I watched a little bit more of that game just to rewatch the second half. The Mountaineers, yes, they had some self-inflicted wounds in that game, but that's a fairly good football team. I'm really interested to see Jabari Small keep going for Pitt as well, or I'm sorry, for the Volunteers. He averaged 4.8 yards a carry against Ball State. I know it's against Ball State. I know that it's not the same. It's the Maction and not like a big name opponent. But then you also look at what Jalen Wright did as well. He averaged 6.8 yards a carry as well. Tennessee had 5 rushing touchdowns. Pitt gave up 190 yards on the ground to West Virginia. That's a concerning thing. I think Tennessee is going to keep this ball on the ground. I think they're actually going to take the ball out of Hendon Hooker's hands and just turn around, hand it to the running back, run a couple of zone read plays as well. But be careful about this. Pitt had 3 sacks and 8 tackles for a loss in that game. If Tennessee gets behind the chains in this game, so let's say you're facing a 2nd and 12, you're facing a 3rd and 9, don't be shocked to see Pitt pin their ears back and take off at Hooker. If you look at this, it's got to come down to that Tennessee offensive line. Are they able to protect Hendon Hooker when it's an obvious passing situation? On the reverse of this, Tennessee, they have to do the same thing. Now, against Ball State, they had 0 sacks. That concerns me as well because Ball State isn't like this great offensive line factory right there. And you weren't able to get any type of pressure on them. Now, Tennessee, their game plan was more to drop back into coverage and make plays and force Ball State to beat them underneath or be able to just step up and put the ball carrier down before they got to the first down line. You look, what kind of defense does Tennessee run? Do they blitz a little bit more often in this game here? You look at this, Tennessee, they have 3 wide receivers that are going to be matchup problems, led by senior Cedric Tillman. All of these guys are 6'3" or bigger. That's a huge matchup problem for Pitt. So you're going to look at this. Are they going to take some shots? Are they going to be, is Pitt going to be able to play the same level of defense in those situations? Again, I look back at that West Virginia game. Those taller receivers for West Virginia gave Pitt problems at times last week. For Pitt also, Slovis needs to continue to manage that game. Be in control. Play, hit Mumfield down the sidelines, and then also run with Rodney Hammond just to kind of set up those big plays. You need Pitt to kind of wear down that Tennessee defense to make them come up. Because this Tennessee defense is likely to make mistakes if you kind of set them up. It's almost like being in a boxing match. You sit there, you throw a couple of jabs at someone to hopefully where they bring their guard down a little bit and you can throw that big right hook at them. That's what Pitt has to do in this game. So the question I'm going to ask, though, who can put the pressure on the other team? Both of these teams are built to play ahead. I don't really like either one of these teams. If you got down 10 points, do you really feel that good that this team can stop that opposing offense and make up the ground offensively? I want one of these teams to kind of do that. If Tennessee races out to a 10, 14-point lead in that first quarter, watch out for Pitt. But Pitt has an opportunity. All eyes were on them last week. They got a marquee win against West Virginia. They could have a second marquee win against Tennessee. If this happens, Kenny Pickett who? Jordan Addison who? Tennessee, you get a shot to announce yourself. Are you truly back? Yeah, it's one thing to put the boots to Ball State and boat race them out of Rocky Top. But now you look at this. You're going into a hostile environment. Great job by the student section of Pitt. Are you able to beat that ranked team? In the end, I told you fresh, I was high on the Volunteers all this season. I like Hendon Hooker as the sleeper Heisman candidate. I'm going with the Volunteers in this game, but it's going to be a shootout. 45-38 Tennessee.
There's a lot of excitement in this football game. I think the first thing that I looked at was Pat Narduzzi. He's a defensive guy, but he's also a tough guy. And seeing all the disrespect, and he even came out with a claim of Big Ten SEC bias toward the ACC. I kind of got to laugh at that because you claim about SEC bias all the time. So it's really funny how he's putting that disrespect card to the entire Pitt Panther program, and hopefully that they can, use that to dig deep a little bit and show that they have abilities, show they have skills, show they can compete at the highest level. I think Tennessee knows that this is the opportunity. They shut their offense down basically last week in the first half, and they didn't need to put it. They sort of got everyone else some work. They're gonna have to play the full four quarter, and I think they're gonna play a much better defense. And it's going to be interesting to see what Narduzzi concocts defensively. There's a whole host of 4 or 5, maybe even 6 guys who were first and second team All ACC last year in the postseason defensively and preseason All ACC this year. They have talent on that team, but can they put it all together? I don't truly trust the Pitt offense if they got in a shootout to keep up. Keaton Slovis had a lot of underneath passes. He didn't really wow me with that up tempo pass game. Maybe he makes that adjustment this week, but they can't afford to get in a shootout with Tennessee because Tennessee does have that ability from the quarterback position to run it and also to sling it around the field wherever you want. So you've got to slow it down, make it ugly, and try to force Hooker into making bad decisions. I think Tennessee knows this is their chance to really announce because they still were 7-6 last year. They're all the fire coming into this year. They're going to be back and everything's going to be all happy up there. And about 25 different things on Twitter from different videos of Tennessee fans, singing new songs and all other stuff. And it's actually really funny to pay attention to. But you have the energy. Now the team's got to back it up. I think the Vols get it done 34-17.
I like it, Air Fresh, but there is SEC bias. Florida unranked to 12.
Hey, they beat the number 7 team in the country.
Come on. All right, so game of the week here, Fresh. The one we've all been waiting for. One of the top games of the season, in my eyes, because I think it's going to tell us a lot. The Alabama Crimson Tide traveling to Austin, Texas to face the Texas Longhorns. Alabama is a 20-point road favorite in this game. Both teams coming off big wins. Fresh, give me a little something about Alabama and Texas.
Well, first off, I hope everyone else has seen this video. It was taken by somebody in Austin after the game when Texas had their big win over UL Monroe. The band was marching from the stadium back to wherever they were going, and the entire band was yelling, "They're going to beat the hell out of Alabama." You have talent on offense? Yes. Do you recruit a bunch of guys? Yeah. Don't poke the bear, or in this case, poke the Saban. If he wants to run it up, I'm sure he'll sort of look over at the side and say, "Hey, Bryce, keep chucking it." You can be confident, but don't do it where he makes sure that the 20 point actually looks like mercy, and they put up 30 on you. They'll be that right there. Just sort of, I see all these people, the race signs of we want Bama this and we want Bama that. You get what you're asked for. You better make sure you're not cutting checks that the football team can't cover their marching band. Texas, you're at home. It's a noon kickoff. I'm sure everyone wanted it to be a night game. It'd be real hot. Something's gonna be beaten down there. Is that an advantage for one team or the other? I really don't know. It's going to be hot for both, so I think that might actually be detrimental to both offenses. They might be a little more slower paced. But this is the chance for Ewers or Bijan Robinson, for Xavier Worthy, and those multiple high recruits on the offensive line to show up and put up offense. They're going to have to score points in this football game because Alabama's going to score. We know Texas's defense last year, and they were terrible. And I don't really have much confidence in them to get much stops on Bryce Young and that offense that Gibbs and Burton and the rest of those guys bring over from Tuscaloosa. So your offense for Texas is going to have to be ready to go. And Steve Sarkisian, we know how it goes with assistant coaches. Until recently with Jimbo and Kirby, not many assistants have had much success versus former head man. So your offense, you've got to concoct some crazy offense. You got to keep the pace going, and you've got to score touchdowns and not turn it over at a very high pace to be able to beat Alabama. If you play with them, you have a chance of saying, "All right, we're back." Even if you keep it close, if it's a touchdown ball game, it shows there's been improvement there in Austin. If you get curb stomped, then it really shows that there is no direction. I picked Texas to win the Big 12, so I'm kind of hoping y'all show up, at least make it a ball game. This is going to go a long way in both programs' directions because if Alabama comes out there and does it, everyone's going to know it's Alabama. Here they are. They're loaded again, even without John Mechie and Jamison Williams. If Texas makes it a close game or even somehow pulls out the win, then you know what? Having that conversation about Texas being back or Texas going in the right direction. 2019, Texas hosted LSU, and they were in a shootout. Sam Ellinger and company went toe to toe with Joe Burrow and those guys, and that was probably, other than the Alabama game, middle of the season, that was probably the most competition LSU had. But that was a jumping point for LSU. But it was also showed that Texas had some talent. 2021, there were nothing there, but you have opportunity in front of you. Challenge Alabama. Throw the ball around. You can make it happen, but you've got to be physical and you've got to protect the quarterback. I still think Alabama gets it done. I think there's a lot of intangibles there, and I think Alabama, Will Anderson, that defense, Dallas Turner, Eli Ricks, and the rest of the guys are gonna they're gonna straighten out Texas early. But I think Texas finds a way to at least make it competitive through the end of the third quarter. Fourth quarter, they get worn down. I'm gonna go ahead and say 37-27 at the end of the ball game. But Texas makes it somewhat competitive. But they're not going to beat Alabama. This is going to be Alabama showing that they are truly ready to rock and roll again. For the 100,000th year in a row.
So we're going to learn whether or not Texas is ready for the SEC. I think this is the first little taste that we're going to get of where is this Texas program going. Is Texas ready to join where the big boys play, or are you going to wind up being an afterthought when you join and just a money-making program that is in name only? Like, we've been talking forever. How long has it been since Texas is back and Texas is back? And we keep hearing the same song and dance. Sooner or later, you have to produce on the field. If you're going to produce on the field, this is the game to produce against. Ewers and Robinson are going to have to play ball control. Like, Texas has got to win the time of possession battle in this game. If Alabama is holding on to the football for 35 minutes in this game, Texas, you're probably getting the doors blown off of you. I mean, really, this is a tornado through Tornado Alley coming through from Tuscaloosa. If the Longhorns are able to hold on to the football, if they're able to kind of, put together 9, 10, 11 play drives, then I think Texas has a chance. You're going to have a better game from Xavier Worthy as well. The kid only had 2 catches and 24 yards in the first game. He's got to show up in this type of game. Alabama, can you have one other running back stand up right now? Like, Alabama needs to move away from Bryce Young being the primary ball carrier as well. I know Bryce Young had 100 yards rushing last week, and good for him. But if he is your hopes and dreams of getting back to a national championship level team and winning that national title, you can't have him being your sole offense. You can't have him being throwing the ball and running the ball all over the place. you need to be able to have him turn around, hand the ball off 15 to 20 times to a running back who's going to get you anywhere from 80 to 120 yards and really be able to soften up some defenses to allow Bryce Young to take those shots. I'm looking at you, Alabama. I'm looking at you saying that you have a lot to prove in this game. And what I mean by that is you can't let Texas hang around. This is the type of game that you have to exert your will and say, we are Alabama. You're nowhere close to this. There's only 3-4 programs at max that can match up talent-wise on the field with us. If you let Texas hang around, or let's say it's late in the game and Texas has got a lead and you have to come back to beat them, there's going to be a lot of questions about Alabama. You're still going to have the respect. You're still going to have people say that you're good. You're really good. But your schedule is a gauntlet this year. And there's going to be a lot of people starting to ask those questions. Which of these games is Alabama going to lose? Because Alabama usually, not always, but usually stubs their toe sometime along in that season. These are the type of games where you can make sure those questions stay in people's mind and not being vocalized out there. And then I'm with you here, Fresh. I think Alabama wins this game. I'm going 38-24. I'm going 14 points in here. I would be interested to take Texas in that 20 number, though. I think I probably would take Texas in the 20, but I'm going to go with Alabama with a 14-point win. And I also want to see Will Anderson. Will Anderson had a quiet, I'm going to use the finger quotes right there, a quiet game for his standard. I want to see Will Anderson, really cause some havoc in that Texas backfield. I'm interested to see what he does and see what other Alabama defender stands up here. But like I said, I don't really like going against Saban, and I don't think Sarkisian is ready for Saban. I think maybe in a year or two we'll have that conversation. But again, I got 38-24 Crimson Tide.
Well, I think Will Anderson's going to turn it on. I mean, they shut him down pretty early versus Utah State last week. He is going to come in full force. And Gibbs, the Georgia Tech transfer running back, they shut him down early last week. I'm saying he's going to have 120 and 2 touchdowns.
Wow.
Running back, and he'll have his burst on the scene moment this upcoming Saturday.
They're going to need that for sure. Hey, Fresh, before we sign off here, we got an underrated game. I kind of just found that. I know we're not going to go into this at all here because we did our 5 games, but Old Dominion, who pulled off the Vitek upset, traveling to ECU, who almost pulled off their own upset against NC State. Both of those teams play each other at ECU this year. If you're looking for one of those games like, hey, I need a game to throw on in the background, if you can find that game somewhere, I might throw that one on. I think that could be a sneaky fun one to watch.
I mean, we got tons of games. We brought up 5 today, but you look, there's Washington State travels to Wisconsin, Houston at Texas Tech, Oregon State, Fresno State, Mississippi State, Arizona, South Carolina, Arkansas, Wake at Vandy, Duke at Northwestern. So if you're really smart, you can watch those 2 matchups. Missouri, K-State, UTSA at Army, Arizona State, Oklahoma State, Virginia, Illinois, USC, Stanford, BC, Vatech, and Kansas, West Virginia. I mean, there's a plethora of entertaining, intriguing matchups. So whether you can find it, find the TV, whether you're streaming, there are games out there to definitely enjoy. Now, for that ECU ODU game, I watched that. The ODU offense is terrible. ECU will beat them by 40.
Interesting. And you forgot Army versus UTSA.
No, I said that one.
Oh, you did? Oh, I missed you. I missed hearing that one.
Ignore me. It's okay.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun one, man. All right, Fresh. Week 2 is in the books for us and our predictions. It's just time to play the games. But remember, folks, that the Irrational Confidence Podcast is part of Spinnable Sports. So make sure you're going to spinnablesports.com. Yep, that is spinnablesports.com. Like, subscribe wherever you get your podcast from, whether it's Apple, Spotify, Amazon Pods, Good Pods. I know there's a bunch of more out there. I don't know. I'm going to learn them all someday here. Like, subscribe, leave us that 5-star review because you guys know Fresh and I, we're those 5-star prospects. If you're watching this on the YouTube, Make sure you like, subscribe to the Spinnable Sports channel. Leave us those 5-star reviews on YouTube. Give us that thumbs up. Leave us the comments. We love it. Hey, I know we both have faces made for radio, but, at least you're watching us on there. Follow us on Twitter. We've talked about this quite a bit. We love interacting with our fans there on Twitter. Over 15,000 people follow us on Twitter. We put out a weekly poll. So if you want to pick what's going to be the 5th game of week 3, check out this weekend. We will have a new poll going out there. Fresh and I, at the end of our episodes, usually get together and pick our 3 or 4 games that we're going to put out there on the poll. So make sure you follow us there on Twitter as well. Fresh, it's going to be a heck of a week. And don't worry here. I talked about the Vero Beach Pirate Festival and the Festival of the Trees. We're about 3 weeks away from the Vermilion Woolly Bear Festival. I'll tell you all about the Woolly Bear Festival someday.
As long as you bring me some Dairy Dock ice cream, I'm okay.
Yeah, I know. All right, ladies and gentlemen, have a great weekend.
Bye, y'all.